The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. As Jesus came down from the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and approached the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. Immediately on seeing him, the whole crowd was utterly amazed. They ran up to him and greeted him. He asked them, "What you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I have brought up to you my son possessed by the mute spirit. Whatever sees him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciple to drive it out, but they were unable to do so." He said to them in reply, "O faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I endure you? Bring him to me." They brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, the spirit immediately threw the boy into convulsions. As he fell to the ground, he began to roll around and foam at the mouth. Then he questioned his father, "How long has he been happening to him?" He replied, "Since childhood. It has often thrown him into fire and into water to kill him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible to one who has faith." Then the boy's father cried out, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." Jesus, on seeing the crowd rapidly gathering, rebuked the unclean spirit and said to it, "Mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Shouting and throwing the boy into convulsions, it came out. He became like a corpse, which caused many to say, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by hand, raised him, and he stood up. When he entered the house, his disciple asked him in private, "Why could we not drive the spirit out?" He said to them, "This kind can only come out through prayers." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today, this morning, we begin the reading of the letter of St. James. St. James became the Bishop of Jerusalem, and he was the one who presided over the very first council in the church, the very first council. And in fact, he made the final decision with the rest of the disciples about whether people joining the church should become Jewish first. Now, this was an extraordinarily serious matter, very serious. Did non-Jews, in other words, Gentiles, did they have to abide by kosher laws? Did they have to become circumcised? Do they have to avoid certain foods? And the decision was no. You are not to impose these extra obligations on people joining the church who are non-Jewish. St. James also was the one who pointed out, in times of serious illness, is there anyone sick among you? Let him send for the priest of the church, and the priest of prayer will save the sick person. And if that person is in sin, their sins will be forgiven them. Now, it doesn't mean if you're having a bad cold or a bad hair day or whatever. It means you are seriously ill. In other words, if you have to go, or I have to go to the hospital for surgery, I would consider that serious. Why? Because any time you're put under an anesthetic, you're handing over control to other people. Therefore, I think that's a serious matter. Anytime you receive an anesthetic, that is a serious issue. So in situations like that, I would suggest that you come to the office, make an appointment to see the priest, and receive the sacrament of the sick. It's not the sacrament of the dying. It's not the sacrament of the dying. And unfortunately, for many, many years, somebody was ill at home, or father or mother, and they wouldn't call the priest because if a priest came, it would scare them and what have you. But that's all changed now, and for the better. I mean, if we leave somebody who's seriously ill until they're dying, how can the sacrament of the sick have an impact on them? Of course not. So that's a very important thing to do. The gospel this morning, interesting, this thing happens just after the transfiguration, after John and Peter, James, and John had escorted Jesus up the mountain where he was transfigured, transformed. And you remember that Peter said to the Lord, Lord, I think it's a good idea if we stay here. It was such a good experience. And the Lord said, no, we have to go down from the mountain. We have to go back to where life is really lived on a daily basis. And then he's confronted with this very serious case of, I guess, epilepsy. And the ironic thing about it is the only time I remember in the scriptures where the apostles failed to heal the sick person. The only time, I think. But the Lord pointed out, this one can only be healed by prayer. More prayer. More prayer. And that's a wonderful example for all of us too. Sometimes we wonder where God is. Is he listening? Has he taken a vacation or whatever? But of course not. Of course not. The Lord is always there. I remember, I think it was with that terrible tragedy in Oklahoma when that young man blew up the federal building, and I think 169 persons were killed. And somebody asked, where was God? And somebody made the very interesting point. God was in the first responders. God was there with the nurses and the doctors and the many other people who came to help in that terrible tragedy. That's a good insight that the Lord is present always, and he's present in all our brothers and sisters who come to our aid.